All right, so yes, as Sooner explained, I'm a poker player. Now, I don't know how familiar you all are with poker. It's often tricky trying to explain poker to a range of different skill levels, but today I'm going to assume you're all pretty good, okay? And if any of you guys are feeling lost and so on, by all means, put up your hands, ask for anything to be explained at any point. So the thing about poker, it's often considered as both an art and a science. The artistic side comes from the creativity and the intuition you feel sometimes in a hand and so on. The sciencey part is actually the methodology and logic you use to come up with those creative plays. Both approaches have merit, but these days the strongest players are the ones that approach the game very quantitatively. The game is actually very different to how it used to be 10 years ago. Back then, most of the players that were very good were playing the game based upon street smarts that they had gained from years and years of experience at the tables. Nowadays, the best players are the ones that are taking a very analytical approach and using mathematical analysis and practical application of a branch of mathematics called game theory. So how are these players doing this? Well, our goal when playing is to optimize our decisions, and we want to build strategies that put our opponents in situations where they have a hard time optimizing their decisions. Now, of course, there's the basic poker strategies, which I'll bring up. Most of you will probably be familiar with these, but I'll run through them anyway. The first one is be selective. Now, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. A lot of people try when they start playing poker to just play every hand in every position. You don't want to do that. You're going to lose a lot of money very fast. And similarly, on certain flop textures and so on, you can't carry on playing every single hand. You know, if you have aces on ace 4, 5, 6, 7 and ace king on ace 4, 5, 6, 7 and 4 spades and you have red ace king, you don't want to keep betting it. You know, like there are certain situations where you need to be a little bit selective and fold and so on. The next thing is position. Acting last is best. So position is when the order in which you make your plays. So this moves around the table as a dealer button moves around. If you are in position, you have a much bigger advantage because you get to see what your opponent does first. The next thing is be aggressive, apply pressure. If we were just playing honest poker where you only, the person who has the best hand wins, well, it'd be pretty boring. And by being aggressive, you give yourself another way of winning a hand. You can get your opponent to fold, so you don't always have to have the best one. The fourth sort of key strategy, and this is the most important one, is being unpredictable. We want to make life hard for our opponents, not for us. The way we do this is we build a balanced range of hands that we could feasibly have. So again, say on a board like ace 6, 7, if we only ever bet when we have an ace, well, we're going to be pretty face up to our opponents. Or if we only ever bet when we don't have an ace, again, it's making us very easy to exploit. So you want to build a range of hands that you could conceivably have in any given situation. But all of these strategies are very 2005. We're in 2016 now, and the game's very different. In order to play against the best, be the best these days, you need to adopt mathematical strategies that minimize your exploitability and maximize your profitability. This is mostly done by analyzing what are known as ranges. And these are the set of possible hands that combination of hands that you or your opponents could have in a certain situation. So, this is a visual representation of a range. No, don't go back. There we go. So, down here, you can see my mouse, right? Yeah. So, up here you have an ace all the way down to a deuce on this axis, and same here, ace to deuce. And then, obviously, ace, ace, pocket aces, king, king, queen, queen, so you've got all the pairs down there. In total, there are 1,326 total possible combinations of Texas Hold'em two-pair starting hands. And you'll see that it's been split in two. This bottom left are the unsuited hands, and top right are the suited ones. And it's important to split these because suited hands have a lot more equity and playability than unsuited hands, so we need to keep those separated. How you want to start building a strategy is to think about the relationship between the range of hands that you're playing and what your opponents are likely to be holding. We do this by looking at the playing tendencies we've observed of a player on each round of betting. This analysis allows us to get a more accurate image of their range as the hand progresses. Here's a simple example, reasonably simple. So this is a standard opening range by a good player against another good player on the button. And remember, the button is the position where you act last, so it's the strongest hand. Sorry, the strongest position you can be in. All the hands in yellow are the ones you'll be opening 100% of the time. The little numbers are the percentage of time that you would open them. So say, for example, like King 4 suited here, you'd actually be opening 3/4 of the time, 75% of the time. Most players develop a range like this kind of intuitively from experience. But these days, there's actually some really cool poker algorithms you can use that calculate this for you using iterations of fictitious self-play, meaning they play a huge number of hands versus themselves to find the very best strategies. This button opening range is taken from one of these programs, and it represents the game theory optimal opening range against another optimal player. So if we've got the button opening range, then conversely, if we're in the big blind, we'll have a defending range. And this is the optimal defending range against that range we saw. So now we're defending about 40% or so of hands. This one's a little bit more complicated because you notice, so all the ones in grey are the ones that we fold, so all the really crappy ones like 10-5 off, 9-4 off, and so on. But we've also missing these ones. And the reason why is because this is the cooling range. If you get dealt aces or ace-king, kings, queens, those super strong hands in the big blind, you're going to re-raise them, so those aren't going to be in this range, that we can exclude them. Sorry, lost my place. So after our 2 cards, there are actually 50 cards left in the deck that we have available to us. And of these, this means we can have 20,000 possible flops. It's a lot of flops that we want to try and analyze. Fortunately, you can actually narrow these down into like different categories. Say, for example, a flop like 8 deuce deuce is very similar to 7 deuce deuce, so we can lump them together and analyze them. And ace 8-9 is kind of the same as ace 7-8, and so on. You can then use the program to determine the optimum play for these different flop textures. So let's have a look at one. So let's say the board comes 9 of clubs, 8 of spades, 3 of diamonds. In this situation, the program is recommending, that the out of position player checks to the raiser around 100% of the time. The reason being is, if you remember before, their strong hands have been excluded. And so the big blind's range is significantly weaker than the button opening range. The different colors show the different actions that the program recommends. So all the dark oranges the program is recommending that you bet big. The salmon color is betting small, and the green is checking. In response, the big blind has these options. They can raise, they can call, and they can fold, again represented by the different colors. And then we can go further along the game tree to the turn, which say it comes the 6 of clubs. And again, we can calculate the optimal play. And we can keep doing this until we get to the river. Well, what's interesting here, let me go on to the river. What's interesting here, if you remember, at the beginning, we saw that the button was opening around 50% of hands, so around 650 combinations of possible playing cards. But by the time we've gotten to the river, from the big blind's point of view, their opponent, if you assume that the button has opened, and then bet flop, and then bet turn, and then bet river, this has been narrowed down now from 650 to only 57 combos. So this is actually really, really useful for information for the big blind. They've got a very accurate assumption of what their opponent's range is, and so they can play their range accordingly. Once you put your opponent on an accurate range like this, you can better figure out the equities of your options and therefore make the best play. Now, in this example, and with all of these programs that you use, these are assuming that you are a game theory optimal player and you're playing against game theory optimal players. After huge numbers of iterations, and we're talking like trillions of hands of this fictitious self-play, the programs come to an equilibrium, which I heard someone mention earlier, Nash equilibrium you might have heard of. At that point, the discovered strategy that you're playing is absolutely unbeatable by any other strategy. To explain this better, I want you guys to imagine rock, paper, scissors. I imagine you're all familiar with rock, paper, scissors, right? So when you play that, what would you guys suggest is the optimal strategy that you could play with rock, paper, scissors? Anyone?
Throw a dice.
Throw a dice?
Yeah.
Right, and why would you do that?
Because in that case, whatever opponent does, you can still get equal chance of winning.
Right, exactly. You would choose to make yourself as perfect random number generator as possible so that you throw out rock 33% of the time, scissors and paper and so on. And therefore, the best counter strategy that you could do with that is also be a random number generator and throw it out 33% of the time. So your best case scenario in that situation is to only break even. However, just because a strategy is unbeatable doesn't mean it's the most profitable strategy. If we go back to rock, paper, scissors, and I start throwing 100% rock against you, well, do you want to continue still being that random number generator? Probably not, right? You could carry on being the random number generator, but you actually wouldn't be beating me. You'll be playing game theory optimally, but you won't be making the biggest profit. If I'm playing rock 100% of the time, you'd want to start playing paper 100% of the time. And the same applies in poker. While playing game theory optimal is the optimal strategy, is an unbeatable strategy, it's not necessarily always the best strategy, especially as humans are not game theory optimal. Most of the time you're playing against 8 or so opponents, some of whom have never even heard of game theory optimal, and are therefore very ripe for exploitation. Some players, like examples of exploitation, some people think that they always want to slow play aces. That means play them tricky and passively, and therefore they're actually going to be missing out on opportunities, and you can exploit that. And same, someone playing 100% on the bottom because they heard it's the best position. So again, you want to, if you just stick with the GTO strategy, you're going to be missing out on those exploitations. But the funnest part of poker, and I guess the bit we're going to talk about a little bit now, is actually the reads, the experience you get in learning how to understand the human psychology and I guess exploit these players and look for weaknesses in them. And I have a fun video to show you guys, which demonstrates this very well. And in this video is someone here who you might know, Igor Kurganov. And well, I'll play the video and then any questions you guys might have.
300 ante. Action. Hold it around to Matthias Nordhaus. Castles. Igor Kurganov, King Jack off. Expect he's going to open. He does, with a range to 4,000. Oh my god, who is that? That is Slade Fisher. He's salted. Ola Shemian, Queen 7 off on the button, and that is a re-raise, a 3-bet to 9,100.
Re-raising an early raise against a really good player with junk. There is some history between these two. Igor knocked Shemian out of the 25K in Australia, then went on to win.
Ace Jack 6 on the flop. Kurganov checks. Shemian, absolutely no hand whatsoever.
And this is almost certainly getting called.
Kurganov with a second pair.
Only a third of the size of the pot, which is fine in a 3-bet pot.
He calls. 7 on the turn. Shemian now has third pair.
A lot of folks are going to slow down now, but no, not Shemian. He's just going to continue bloating. A third of the size of the pot, which is fine in a 3-bet pot.
He calls. 7 on the turn. Shemian now has third pair.
A lot of folks are going to slow down now, but no, not Shemian. He's just going to continue bloating this pot like the gluttony seed in 7.
He bet 16,100. Once again, Kurganov calls.
Kurganov were ahead on the flop. He'd very likely still be ahead now.
9 of hearts on the river, and Kurganov checks a third time.
This is a super wet river card. Is Shimmy gonna get weird here?
He shoves. He overbets the pot.
Straights came in, obviously the flush. This is a sick bluff, and it's his best shot at getting Kurganov to fold exactly the hand he's got. Sometimes even better. Right now, it's Kurganov's tournament life over second pair.
Roland did a different sound than it before.
Uh-oh.
Because your hand was shaking, it's making it tougher. I don't know. Normally it's because you're so happy that you have it. It was a friendly smile to me. Ole, ole, ole. Excellent.
Great call.
Sick.
It's an all-in situation. Both hands have to be tabled.
Live reads are not a myth. I've seen it. That call was sicker than Denzel Washington's son and John.
So yeah, do any of you guys have any questions, I guess, first of all, about this to Igor or to me? How did you do it?
Well, as I mentioned at the table as well, it did seem like he was behaving a little bit different, but generally reads are not something that, except when they're very strong, you can base your decision purely upon. Like how you use it most of the time is, well, you think like it's a slightly profitable, like it should be maybe slightly a fold, but like you have the option of maybe calling because it's not that far away, and then you kind of try to find more information by looking at the player, looking at the body language, and this usually only like changes your decision a little bit. So like if you're, say, if you were beforehand 50-50 between folding and calling, now it might change you to like 55-40, 45-60-40. Like it's not like it makes it 90-10 often with good players. I mean, with a player who has just written on their like forehead, do, but in this case it was not quite, and usually like it just changed a little bit. And what was relevant here, which I like to do and which is generally probably true, is like I say some of the things I said are often to get a reaction, and when he smiles at me like friendlily, usually people like, just like again more people when they try to be friendly to you are lying to you. At the poker table at least, like with a bluff. If they just play genuinely their hand, then they're just staying in general like behavior mode with you. Like it's just a normal social situation where their modus of operation is just truth. Whereas when they're like, well, kind of like faking something, their modus of operation is faking, then they will like, come on partner, like let's be friendly. This is why like you can again make a slight assumption that he's more likely lying than not if he is like overly friendly in a situation where it's not so, which is why it can be good, and I try to do that sometimes, is making bad jokes at the table, like, and if they laugh at your bad jokes, it's like, okay. It wasn't really funny thing.
No, I heard that one before.
So, yeah.
That seems like it would be exploitable, but other Shamian doesn't seem like he'd make that sort of mistake.
Right, this hand also, I mean, everyone is still human, like has mistakes that they do and like gets better. This was from 2014 or 13. He was newer on the scene, he was a good player, but he was actually newer in the live sphere. And it's always like, generally also to consider whenever you're in this situation, it's very hard to be a good actor for most people. It's very hard to fake something, and which is why most people are best advised of just sitting and like being deadpan in this situation. Like my situation doesn't matter. Like I don't have to make him do something. So this is why it can be natural. But for him to be natural versus fake, it's pretty hard. And if you're only playing 2-3 years live poker, then you're probably not going to succeed at that very well. And even people like Daniel Negreanu, who is a player who's played now for 20 years probably live poker, even with him you find things that are genuine versus not. Reading people is always easier than faking something. I know it's just so many things you have to think about. Like when you start doing it, then you you look out for your face, right? But the truth is that everyone knows to look out for their eyes where they look. Like that's the first thing we learn about lying. Is like look when they cannot look you in the eyes. So people adapted to that by
Overlooking,
in the eyes, right? And this is like the whole just the sphere of thinking about eye contact exists already in lying. But this is why people are very aware of their faces, but less so of their hands, of their like posture, of
Their feet.
Yeah, feet is good.
Feet, yeah, feet give away a lot.
There's like happy feet. And so you can like pick up a lot of things from people still, even like from me as well. Even though I would consider myself decent and done some lie detection training, etc. Still, like, I will definitely give away stuff. And if you know someone, it's even easier.
Yeah.
Plus, actually, what was also quite helpful. This is why he said it. And also like quite how ballsy Ole is. This was the first hand after the break. We were just like on a 15-minute break, and he ran to the table, like just like I don't want to miss the hand. Picks up the hand like and instantly just blasts it off like that. So it's quite ballsy to do it, but at the same time, when your blood is more flowing, you're probably less composed and less able to again be a good actor because things will just stay in motion. More.
Yeah.
When you called the flop, were you almost like planning partly for this to happen and kind of setting them up for this?
When it's you want to do two things, I guess. In poker, you want to consider how profitable the single action is, and you also want to have a general plan. Sure. So you want to generally have a plan for the hand, but only because you don't doesn't mean you shouldn't do an action right now. So if you think that the call is profitable because the math suggests so, then if there's one spot, then it is. And as long as you don't play afterwards very poorly, then it will remain profitable. So things can change from the assumed profitability if you're afterwards probably going to be in a tough spot or playing poorly, or the other one can get an advantage on you. Then you might overfold. Also, what helps in this hand is I have the King of Hearts. There's three hearts. He's trying to represent a flush or a set or straights. And quite a few combinations of those are suited kings that he would play that way. And by me having the King of Hearts, now he has 6 combinations of suited kings removed that he would sometimes 3-bet and bet with. So this gives me a bit of a it's a better calling hand than say if I had King of Spades with a jack. And this is the other aspect what Liv showed before with all the combinations. We narrow it down in the end to, in the previous case, on 93-57 combinations, from which probably 2/3 are value and 1/3 is bluff. So it's 38-19. And now let's assume, wow, he doesn't have out of the 38, 6 are gone. It's quite significant actually in regards to the ratios. And so like little things like that, just combinatorics are very important in poker and definitely something to look out for.
Anyone?
Well, I guess the question from me is, you were saying that the best players nowadays take a mathematical and analytical approach. So do you think your background in kind of physics at university has helped your poker playing?
Yeah, it's definitely given me practice in being analytical, for sure. I mean, those of you who've done any kind of mathematical degree, you become very comfortable in thinking of everything in very quantitative ways. And so again, that applies to poker. You become experienced in how to analyze large quantities of data, of which, that's what you're doing when you're looking at hands. You have to sift through, categorize them, and then be comfortable with dealing with all these huge amounts of data and extracting meaning from them. So yeah, it's been pretty helpful in that respect.
So I guess, can you think of any players that you know whose styles you're very aware of? Like when you get more experience with kind of competing against certain individuals, do you kind of pick up on how they play and you're able to kind of notice what they're going to do and you can sort of predict their moves?
Yeah, well, so if I'm playing against 8 Igors, for example, I know that they're going to be playing very close to game theory optimal. They might deviate now and then and to exploit things that they've seen, but so in a way I know how they're going to be playing, these good players, but because they're playing game theory optimal, they are unexploitable and they are deceptive and so on. So even though I know how they're going to be playing, I don't know how to make money from it, and it's difficult. Whereas there are some players who, like we said before, they are not game theory optimal. They're classically bad players. They're very exploitable, and they have tendencies that you just will notice over time. And they're either being too tight, or they're being too aggressive. They're picking random hands to bluff with that don't make any sense. That kind of thing.
Well, so I guess most people, when they play poker, when they start playing poker, I guess don't know all these kind of technical bits of advice. So how did you, I guess, move from maybe recreational kind of playing of poker to getting into the kind of professional, competitive, live poker playing and becoming so kind of good at the statistics?
Well, for me, it was a weird transition. I started playing I actually started out on a game show, of all things, where they. No, let's not put that video. Very embarrassing. I just graduated. I didn't want to get a real job, so I started applying for game shows. Why not? And the first one I applied for, it turned out that they wanted to get 5 complete poker beginners, which was why they advertised as a game show, not as a poker show, and would teach us how to play. And then from there, I went into. I loved the game. I was like, wow, this is so cool. At the time, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to travel the world and live like a rock star, and then I was like, wait, these poker players, they seem to be doing that. This seems cool. I want to look more into this. Started playing like small local live tournaments, but it wasn't until a couple of years later where I started taking it a bit more seriously. Started playing online. I downloaded PokerStars, was playing sort of very small stakes on there, and that's when I started to take the game more seriously and more analytically. Because that's the difference between online and live. Online, you're getting a hand every 20 seconds or so, would you say? 20, 30, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Yeah, depends on how many tables you play, but you get a lot more volume in. So kind of like the program, you're getting more data you can assimilate, and you're getting that sort of the experiences are coming faster to you from which you learn from, whereas opposed to live, you're getting a hand maybe every 2, 3, 4 minutes. So that's when I started applying more analysis to the game. And then a lot of my learning experience actually came from surrounding myself by people who were much, much better than me, and asking them hands, asking them what do they think about this, hearing their thought process, the kind of things they're thinking about, and then incorporating that into my game.
Well, you just mentioned wanting to live like a rock star, and I suppose if one thinks of films like Casino Royale, where these contests are kind of depicted as really stylistic, kind of sexy, high-stake, sort of fantasy worlds, what does that compare to, I suppose, to the real kind of world of live kind of competitive poker playing? Is it as sort of high risk and
like the Casino
thrilling?
Royale thing?
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, it's not anywhere near as glamorous as that. It can definitely be thrilling. So I mostly play on the live tournament circuit, where I'll go to the European Poker Tour. Like I just got back from Monaco, the PokerStars event there. That's definitely like the most glamorous event there is. It's gorgeous. It's the most Casino Royale feeling thing. And in terms of sort of the high stakes, I mean, in Casino Royale, that was a high stakes cash game, right? They were playing a completely fabricated, ridiculous thing. Anyone who knows poker just laughed at it. Guy bleeding, quads against straight flush. Like this stuff never happens, but of course it did. So there are little facets of that, but for the most part, sort of the tournament circuit is sort of more close, sort of I guess to a sporting tour to an extent. It's held during the day. The big tournaments sort of usually start around noon. There's very strict schedules. There's fixed breaks every 2 hours. So it's not quite like that, but there are some sort of private high stakes cash games that probably do have James Bond types and so on. I just haven't seen them.
Well, I suppose in a general kind of sporting sense, it seems like poker's quite male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's become easier, at least in the time that you've been involved in live poker, to be a female player, or if not, how do you think that could change, or why has it not changed so far?
I mean, there's definitely many more women in poker now than there were when I got into it 10 years ago. And I'd like to think it's in part due to there were a few of us females having success and young women seeing that, or older women, and going, oh, well, if they can do it, why can't I? Before the game sort of became more publicly popular, it was almost exclusively played in small sort of back of pubs, sort of like the underground scene. And I think that was probably more intimidating to women in general, from, who knows, like safety, security point of view, and just because, it was seen more of a boys' club. Whereas now, women are extremely welcome. I've always felt unbelievably welcome at the table. And in general, yeah, there's the industry has tried to do everything it can to make it not a boys' game anymore. It's still, the ratios are unacceptably bad. In the high-stakes tournament, you'll still see maybe only 2-3% females. But at the lower stakes, it's more even now, and it's just a lag of sort of social economic reasons, really. Back in the 50s, women were only encouraged to be nurses, housewives, whatever, and that takes a while to catch up. Even though we're in 2016 now, it's still, there's that lag of financial independence. I mean, if you want to be playing poker regularly, you need to be fully financially independent, and there's still that lag time.
I guess, and I suppose in a way, gambling's always kind of portrayed as like a man's pursuit, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I try to not lump in poker with gambling too much.
Oh, sure.
It's fine. I mean, there is obviously,
or even
a
card
gamble.
games in
right,
general.
no, you're right. And another thing is that's interesting, I mean, poker is obviously a highly competitive, very in-your-face competitive game. Yeah. And who knows whether there are some sort of physical reasons where women just tend to not enjoy that as much. Again, I think it's probably more a sort of historical social thing more than an actual physical sort of dislike of competition. But yeah, it's probably a little bit of a combination of that too. But that said, the women that do like it, they love it almost more than the men. They love it so much, and I think there's a little bit of that in everybody. It's just some, it's a spectrum. Some people really like intense competition and some don't, and similarly there are many men that have tried it and they just hated it because they just didn't like the sort of confrontational style of the game. And it's just more down to the individual.
Well, I suppose beyond kind of poker, which I suppose is the thing for which you're most known, you do a lot of charity work, a lot of philanthropic work. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a bit about the sort of more charitable side of what you get up to when you're not playing.
Yeah, sure. So about 2 years ago or so, I was starting to feel a little bit itchy feet with just playing poker and thinking, I'll stand up again so you guys can see me better. Feeling like, is this all I'm going to be doing for the next 10 years? Am I just going to be playing poker? I really love this game, but I want to do something else too. And Igor was also feeling the same, so were a few of my other friends. And we got introduced to a guy, a Swiss poker player called Stefan Huber. And he was very unique in that he was playing poker almost entirely to earn as much money as he could to give away to charity, and not just to any charities. He was subscribed to a philosophy known as effective altruism. And if I go back, I have some nice slides for this. Let's get this open. There we go. I'll just let you have a look at that. Some of you might be familiar with effective altruism already, but is it not working?
Just the alt cable.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Oh. Nope.
So yeah, effective altruism is basically asking yourself the fundamental question, how can I do the best for the world? What are the things that I can do? And it's basically combining the heart and the brain when it comes to charity. When we usually think about charity, we tend to sort of do it in a very emotional way. We'll see something on the TV that makes us go, oh wow, that's awful, I want to do something about it. And that's fantastic, but there are huge sort of disparities between some problems are just much bigger than others, and some are much easier to solve than others. So effective altruism is applying sort of science and mathematics basically to figuring out the most effective ways to solve these problems. Which problems are we going to be able to solve easiest per dollar donated? And let me just click through. That's me talking about. So yeah, lots of different suffering groups around the world. And the thing is that when we go to donate, we only ever have a finite amount of funds to give. And it's very important that if our resources are finite, that we give our money to causes which are going to help the most amount of people as quickly as possible and remove as much suffering as possible. You guys all remember the Ice Bucket Challenge a couple of years ago, right? It was an incredibly successful charity campaign that went viral, ended up raising $140 million for ALS Foundation, I think it's called. And the thing is about ALS, it's actually a very rare disease. It affects approximately 2 in 100,000 people, equaling around 35,000 deaths per year annually around the world. And because it's a very hard disease to treat, the cost of researching ALS is very expensive. It translates to an average cost to save a life somewhere between $0.6 and $1.6 million. Whereas if we look at a disease like malaria, which is extremely common, it kills over 500,000 people a year. But there are charities, for example, the Against Malaria Foundation, which they've calculated they can save a life for somewhere around $3,400 per life. That's quite a significant difference. And so if we take a look at the $140 million that was raised and see how many people that would actually save, you give it to the ALS Association, that saves somewhere between 87 to 233 lives. Great, but if we donated that to Against Malaria Foundation, we would save over 400,000 lives. And that's a really significant difference. And obviously, ALS is a horrible disease, and I absolutely agree that people deserve to be treated and saved from that. But the point is, if we're going to donate large sums of money, then it's very, very important, if we assume lives are equal, that we donate it primarily to the place where we're going to save the most. And in this instance, we would save orders of magnitude more people with that same amount of money. So these are the kind of stats that blew me away and made me realize, well, effective altruism, this just makes so much sense. What can we do? And we met with some full-time effective altruists, some of whom are actually were originally based here in Oxford. And we decided to come up with an organization called Raising for Effective Giving. Raising because of chips and so on. And our goal with it is, well, two things. First of all, we want to raise as much money for a number of highly effective charities. And secondly, we want to build a movement of effective altruists within the poker community. The charities that we raised money for were taken from the top recommendations from 2 independent charity evaluators. One of them is GiveWell, and the other one is Animal Charity Evaluators. And this is just a few of the ones we raised for. Again, we actually also included a couple of extremely important and underfunded research institutions, one of which, again, is based here in Oxford, the Future of Humanity Institute. Some of you might be familiar with Professor Nick Bostrom is here, and they're one of the charities that we support. And so far, things have been, oh, no, not yet. So far, I think it's gone really, really well. We've been running for almost 2 years, and we've raised just over $1 million, and we've got plans to run some poker tournaments. There have been extremely successful poker tournaments in the US, raising money for charities, so we would like to do them similar thing for these effective charities. And the next thing we have in mind, and this is perhaps something you guys can think about, is we want to branch out with this similar model into other industries. Just some silly acronyms I came up with: VEG, volleying for effective giving. You know, tennis. It's a huge industry, a lot of potential there to raise a lot of money. Or the one that I've got my eye on, the finance industry. We could have a T, traders for effective altruism. Again, it's a huge industry. It's a lot of very mathematically thinking people who are likely to understand effective altruism and realize the importance of it. So yeah, any ideas you guys have of how sort of to do something similar to, like that would be really cool. And yeah, any questions you might have.
Okay, well, thank you so much for
Thank
that, Liv. Jess will be taking the microphone around, so if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask Liv, please raise your hands high. Remember to speak directly into the microphone so we can pick up your voice for the recording. See someone just there behind you.
Thanks for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you.
So practically speaking, we can't go to a poker table with these charts in our head, calculating Nash equilibria, while also making reads and trying to watch our chip pile. So what are some practical tips that we can take with us now to get us on the track toward the optimization as we continue to learn more about this optimizing strategy?
I mean, I guess practical tips that you can do, the first thing to do is to play, to accumulate as much data as possible. So I assume you play online and so on. Make a note of all your interesting hands and then go and work with a program. I mean, I can talk to you more about this specific program later as well. And really analyze sort of what were the optimum plays that you could have done in that situation, and try and sort of break the game down into as many of these little sort of flop textures and so on. And it's a combination of sort of memorizing it and becoming familiar with sort of the distributions of what percentage of hands should you be betting, big, small, and so on. In terms of practical tips, I mean, Igor, you're the PIO expert. What have you been doing to apply it?
Play for less money while you're not playing very good. This is probably a good practical tip.
Yeah, definitely.
And play for more money when you're good. I mean, actually, the things you mentioned in the very beginning, like the 2005 strategies, as you call them, they still hold true, and dependent on who you're playing against, they will lead you to success or victory. And also, I guess what you've actually said in the interview before is sort of true. Like, just by playing more, you develop experience, and you develop kind of better and faster subconscious intuition, calculation of data, and this really helps definitely to make better decisions.
I mean, in terms of using the programs like this, so how do you apply it? I mean, in real time, if you can get to the stage, I'm thereabouts. For Igor, it's already like very subconscious behavior.
Have you seen that chart in your head when you
Yeah, I try and visualize it. Like, that's, if you can really picture the distribution, the range distribution in your head, and then sort of seeing which bits are excluded. Like, that might work for some people. Some people, for me, I like to just name the hands in my head. Like, okay, what hands would they continue here? Jack 9, King, Queen Jack, Jack 10, so on, and verbally say them. That works for me. Others see it visually. So yeah, experiment with those different things and really just name those hands as in each situation. Okay, now they have just this. Those ones have been eradicated. This. And then this sort of, eventually you do that enough, that process will become sort of automatic.
I think that's a very good tip, especially because often the mistake that one can fall into is going with, he re-raised me, he feels like ace king, and then you it's confirmation bias, which you then succumb to by you look for things which agree with the theory that it is ace king, rather than for things to look out for, well, what else could it be, and how would he behave if it wasn't ace king, etc. And so you want to, and this is why this naming other hands helps. You don't say, he feels like ace king, but rather it could be ace king, ace queen, ace jack. If he was bluffing, he would have 10-7 suited, 10-8 suited, I guess, those hands. And then he bets. And then if you just run a couple through, then you keep a bit more truly in your mind this less biased view, I guess, to what you want it to be, but more to what it actually is.
Sure. Pass the microphone over.
Guy just in the front.
So you spoke a bit about how people try to be good actors but fail at it. I'm just curious if you have any other examples apart from those that you've already mentioned, and failing that, when you play online, is it also the case there that people try to be actors but fail at it? Well, I guess that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely online people. I know it in myself. You know, I have a monster. And I'm like, how do I extract the most value out of my, I have a really strong hand, how do I extract the most value out? And so I'll try and sort of think, well, how long would I want to think about it? I know that I have an instant decision, really. I know that I'm going to raise and so on. But if I make that action very fast, well, if they're half decent, they're going to go, well, she didn't have to think about that very long. That means something. So you can sort of play act that way, sort of tank. It's called tanking. Think for a long time before making your decision. And then in terms of the actual sort of bet sizing that you do, you can sort of try to tell a different story to what is actually the truth. So that's sort of the extent you can do it online. Whereas live, obviously, there's a lot more of the sort of holistic sort of overview of human behaviors that you can do that will try and tell a different story. You know, make yourself smaller to try and show nervousness, or if it's someone who knows that, then overact that you're strong, and so they think that you're weak, and so on. So, I mean, I can't think of any specific examples. Can you think of any?
Just what you explained.
Yeah. So just I mean, thinking of what comfort level you would normally have given what you're representing, and then do the opposite. But as always with all these games, it's a game of levels. You know, if are they on level 1, level 2, and then you have to sort of go one above, and you often get yourself into these weird leveling wars. But generally speaking, people are actually more simple than you think, and that'd be another sort of rule of thumb. Don't over level, because people are probably not as far up the tree as you think they are.
Next question. There's someone just at the back.
So back, there's these two as well.
It seems likely that within a decade, computer AIs will be able to beat humans in online poker. If you agree with that, then do you think online poker is going to die? Do you think it's going to shift to a lot more face-to-face, and would that be a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I think it's coming. I mean, we've just seen what happened with Go. It's happened much faster than we expected it to. So, you know, it's difficult. I mean, with Texas Hold'em in particular, I mean, the decision tree is much more than Go. It's like it's sort of almost an order of magnitude more, from what I understand. So it is going to be. I don't know, will it ever get to the point where it's just solved it completely? I guess so. Let's assume it does. And then in that case, yeah, it will just probably be a matter of time until people have figured out how to have that, sort of running on their computers at the same time. So there is a possibility that at some point in the future that it will sort of break online poker. I don't think it's going to be happening anytime too soon for us to worry about, but it's definitely on a possibility. But I remember actually we were talking about this before. You said that you don't think it's going to be too much of a concern, but
no, I actually think it's nearly inevitable that it's going to happen, because there is a decent amount of money involved in online poker, and so therefore there is an incentive to build like bots that can play very well. And currently it's hard. Like, for example, the program that Liv showed is a solver that runs these plays, but like friends of mine rent a cloud server and for cloud computing, and it still takes a lot of time to go through one situation because of just so many different trees, such a big tree rather moving around it. So therefore, I think that it will take some years, but I actually don't see it not happening. Like, some people see it, and later maybe just like algorithms playing against each other online poker, and then just people writing code rather, and then those codes play against each other. But it's probably going to be a very different game and not very interesting for the general fun player or recreation player. And therefore it is then, yeah, it's gotta only stay in the live realm. And because like this is probably never gonna change, people enjoy all of these other aspects.
Yeah, there's very few, I mean, there are some players that only exclusively play online, but most of us, you know, our main pleasure comes from playing live anyway, because we're still social creatures. We enjoy the social interaction, and running a big bluff is satisfying online, but it doesn't compare to anything to successfully getting away with it in front of someone, you know, looking them in the eye. And there might be adaptations that online poker might make, you know, you have to play with a webcam, and so on. I mean, it'll change the game. Some people might not like that, but that is a possible solution. I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be happening for a good few years. So get in your online poker now.
There can be definitely some security measures put into place.
Yeah.
So, for example, like one VR company is looking to just integrate a poker room there as well. I don't know what will be there, but you could maybe, if like biometric sensors are into place, then you can maybe measure. Like just, I don't know if it's like this much about the pulse currently, but like later on, maybe you can just look if they're actually themselves thinking about it rather than someone else. But for that, like the incentive would need to be pretty big to still keep it going. I guess if just bad news come out about like now computers playing against people instead of people against people, this will probably kind of make the whole industry smaller in online poker as well. Yeah. And then complicated security measures are also less incentivized to be put into place.
I think we've got time just for 2 more questions. Someone just here in the front in the glasses. Oh, okay, and then you next.
And you as well.
And then you at the back.
Do you play differently when you know your hands are going to be on TV than when they're not?
I would like to say no, but in truth, yes. I've definitely played some of my some. I don't know. Like there was one that was on YouTube, which I didn't actually show it. I should have, where I sort of 5-bet bluff. It was just this weird situation where someone had misclicked, and there was a lot of confusion. I remember thinking, "Oh, this would look so awesome if I make a bluff here," and it's on TV. Yes, so there was definitely that. Perhaps if I was on the fence of whether am I going to run this bluff or not, and then I was like, wait, this is going to be shown, and even if I don't get away with it, I still look cool. Yes, okay, let's try it. So yeah, there is that. Yeah, it definitely does make a little bit of a difference. I'd like to think not too much, but I'm probably a little bit more creative and fancy, because it's good to look cool and like.
Okay, was it this gentleman here in front?
My name is Amrinder. I'm from the business school. Okay, my question was around the businesses that have been evolving around poker. Like it started off at casinos, then it became online games, and you talk about charities. You were talking about a security company. I see there are a lot of new businesses which are coming in, and I'm not a risky person. I can't play poker really, but yeah. What kind of businesses do you think would evolve in the next 5 years around poker industry, which can transform the industry, or maybe develop a few new brands? Which
Well, there's one that started recently, which I find very exciting. It's called the Global Poker League, and its goal is to create this sort of very sportified league with teams of players. So there's the London Royals, which I'm the manager of. Go London Royals. And then there's a New York team, a Brazilian team, and so on. And like the goal of that is to sort of they're combining it with these big e-gaming events that they have. You know, the championship of StarCraft and so on. These are big live events, and they've been extraordinarily successful. And there's a lot of good reasons why poker could also be as successful if we can sort of start creating these like teams that people can get behind and so on. Because before it was, you know, you'd have your one favorite player, but now you've got these teams of drafted excellent players all going battle, and you can create storylines out of that and so on. So that's a new venture which has been pretty exciting. And in terms of other businesses, so I'm trying to think what PokerStars, for example, they've moved into more apps. and so on, a lot sort of more focused on just purely recreational players. Like there's jackpot poker and this kind of thing, where it's sort of a combination between social media and like a sort of fun just play on your mobile game, not for real money. So that's becoming more popular. You know, like people will spend lots of money playing like Candy Crush or I don't know, Farmville, whatever the hell those games are, where they buy stuff, and it's not like you can ever extract money out of it, but people pay for that entertainment. And I can see sort of poker working well in that as well. People can buy chips or buy, you can add something to your avatar and so on. There seems to be a lot of popularity in that, and I could see more of those kind of things developing. Can you think of any other?
I mean, yeah, as you said, it used to be more of a gambling part of life, and now it's being moved, and correctly so, more into the sports sphere. And sport is usually just for businesses used in the entertainment industry. And therefore I think that most of what is going to be happening to poker, and poker will be kind of also around that. So whatever you do with, which one to compare with, I guess, with golf events or chess events, like similar things will work in poker as well, or like e-gaming. So Twitch is being is connected quite a bit with poker nowadays. So there will be more attempts to make it more into more entertaining than anything around it.
And I think just one more question. Gentleman just behind you.
Hi, I've just got a question about heads-up play, because I think lots of people prefer and are more comfortable playing nine-handed or maybe six-handed. Right. And obviously when you're playing heads-up, people get more aggressive, the range gets really wide, and then the dynamic changes. So I'm just wondering, what kind of, how do you adapt to the change of pace in the game as soon as you get between only two players?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right with heads up, which is when you're just playing one-on-one. There's nowhere to hide, essentially. Whereas nine-handed, you can sort of sit and play, as you saw before, with range. The range of hands you play, you're playing maybe only, in certain positions, 10, 15, 20% of hands. Whereas when you're playing heads up, if you're only playing 15, 20%, and each time you're having to post some money or chips, then you're going to very quickly get eroded down. You'll be playing too tight. So you have to really become comfortable with playing these more sort of speculative hands. You have to sort of understand the intrinsic value of Jack 6 offsuit, whereas before you wouldn't even have thought of playing it in a full ring game. So heads up, it's a great way of making yourself a better poker player, to really focus on short-handed, because you particularly if you play deep stacked, because there's so much room for creativity. You have to really understand ranges because ranges are much bigger. You need to understand them better, and in terms of sort of practice, you play for small stakes, deep stacked, and get familiar with what what are optimal plays. There's a lot of really good videos out there showing. Is it Run It Once? They have some good heads up videos on there and so on. And I would get used to just watching those and seeing sort of what kind of ranges people are playing and what sort of things they're thinking. And something like ace high in full ring game is not very valuable at all, but in heads up it's very often a hand that you want to cool down with. So it's just sort of getting that experience.
Okay, well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this afternoon. So please join me in thanking Liv Boeree for coming and speaking to us today.